Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and we are finishing up the last bit of work on our Trident cluster model here. Everything's painted and it's basically done, but there are a couple little things we need to do. One is we actually need to attach things. So if you recall, this one uses a bit of a hybrid, so there's a bit of Kevlar thread in there, but most of it is this red elastic. And that's perfectly fine. This is nothing new. We, of course, will tie things off here. And I think what I'm going to do is the usual basics. I'm going to tie a few knots into this. But I'm also going to put a little dab of glue on this. The question is, am I going to use crazy glue or am I going to use just conventional wood glue? I think we could probably get away with conventional wood glue here. So I'm just putting 3 knots in this. That's probably more than enough. And then the extra little, whoops, there we go. The extra little dab of glue will make things extra firm. And I'm probably going to snip this off once the glue sets. Here's parachute 2. This is a little different. It's not an Estes kit, but same basic approach. The only thing that's a little bit different is the thread is not quite as firm as usual, but that's okay. I am still going to grab myself one of these fishing barrel swivels. I'm going to go with the medium-sized one here. The small ones that I usually end up buying this size. The big ones I keep for big rockets. These ones, the small ones, I have used historically in the past, but frankly, they're really hard to work with, and especially considering that this thread is not as stiff as some that I have used in the past. We will pass on that. So we'll just use a medium-sized one, and that ought to be perfectly good. So you've probably seen me do this before if you watched other videos, but we're just gathering up the threads, pinching it down so we can thread it through the eye. There we go. And then we're going to slightly undo the loop that I made there and just push the barrel up, and that will make the knot. Clasp gets undone, and this gets attached to the eye hook here as well. We'll do that a little bit later. What really needs to be done in a somewhat pressing matter, though, is the last little bit of work, and in this case we have decals, but unlike before, we have waterslide decals. These are not stickers. They are printed on a special kind of paper that when you get it warm and wet, the backing falls off and it transfers nicely. So these are going to go, according to the instructions, in this section here. So one's going to go behind the launch lug. That'd be the thicker of these two. And the thinner one then is going to go in front of it. Now it says measure 3 inches, but I mean, honestly, I don't really care. This is aesthetic. You can put it wherever you want. What I did want to point out here is that with these two anyway, I've already trimmed them up. This one I have not yet, but you don't want to just get this thing wet and throw it on. And you could, I guess, but first step would be to trim the sides. Now the instructions, pretty much all the instructions I've ever read involving waterslide decals say, go get your hobby knife and trim. Well, I find that a good pair of sharp scissors, I work better with them for whatever reason, for the most part. So trimming most of this up, I'm going to use scissors. Getting into this corner, though, however, might be a little difficult for scissors. So at this point, I will grab my hobby knife, and I'm going to move stuff, so making sure that I don't cut anything. And the goal is to get as close to the colorful part as possible without actually cutting into it. So you see I've left a little bit of white there from my scissor trimming. And I'm going to try to leave just the teensiest bit in this back part as I cut it out as well. I actually did get closer with the knife, and maybe you will too. I don't know. If you're better with the knife than I am, maybe that's the way you're going to go. So what you need in order to do this is I have a little custard cup here. You can use whatever you want. I like these because they're small enough to work pretty well, but also wide enough that you can get your hands in there. So chuck it in. And I don't really bother knocking it down to the bottom. It just needs to soak through. And that takes somewhere around 30 seconds, give or take. So it doesn't actually appear wet on the top. So I am going to flip it over and in the process, knock it to the bottom. Oh well. I try not to knock it down to the bottom because sometimes they get hard to fish out. And if you leave them in too long, you could end up having them kind of separate, the decal separate from the backing on the bottom of the water, which makes it difficult to fish it out. And you could get them to separate before you want, and that's just irritating. It's something to be avoided. Anyway, lots of Estes kits, and apparently this Rocketarium kit also use waterslide decals. I like them because stickers, you only kind of get one good crack at a sticker, maybe a couple. I mean, I've certainly, in the videos I've recorded that had just plain up stickers, I've reset them a couple times, but you do definitely have a limited number of tries with it. And just for some context here is a Screamin' Mimi that I built some time ago. Notice that the sticker here is kind of delaminating. Actually, it's laminating in a lot of places. So periodically, you need to just get pressed back down. That is not the case with waterslide decals. Once they're on, they're on. Now, waterslide decals do tend to be kind of finicky, and they tend to be very thin. So the solution there is after you have applied them, this rocket will get another coat. It'll be a clear coat. And the clear coat is just kind of like a little bit of extra protection for the decals. And the rest of it, I don't care if the clear coat is gloss that I use, but I don't need this rocket to be any shinier. I'm just interested in protecting the decals. So anyway, I fished it out. It was starting to separate. You can, when it's ready, when it just comes nice and easily apart like this. In fact, this one is probably a little too ready. This, according to the decals, is going to go over one of the thin edges. So I'm going to kind of have to eyeball to get it about halfway, because it's going to then fold over. And I very much want it to lay right the first time if I can help, if I can do that. And just pressing down right now to get it in place. By the way, while I'm messing with this, I'm going to start soaking the other ones, because it usually takes me about 30 seconds to get the decal in the right position. I'm going to move this over here for the time being. I'm probably going to need the hobby knife to trim things up, but I'm not going to worry about that just quite yet. What I do want to do, though, is I've got a piece of paper towel here, and I'm going to use the paper towel to smooth out any bumps and get it as flush with the rocket as possible. So this is the nice part about waterslide decals, is you can adjust them, and you don't generally get any air bubbles when you do this. Now, this part kind of like overlapped a little far because when I sanded the fin down, it's now a little bit smaller than the decal. That's okay. I can live with that. But I'm going to take out my hobby knife once everything is nice and dry, and I'm just going to kind of trim as necessary. The remaining two, well, I'm going to do this one since it's here to show you how to do ones going around body tubes. This one, if I put the launch lug on in the right place, and it looks like I did, is supposed to just barely fit there. So I'm going to kind of edge it off, peel it off a little bit from the backing, and then I'm going to hold it down with my finger, and I'm just going to rotate the decal. Oops. And that kind of should go on smoothly-ish. And essentially follow the contour of the tube. And if I did everything right, it should meet up with the first part. Now that's not quite right. That's okay. Again, the nice part about water slides is you can adjust them before you ultimately put it where it belongs. So now that it's basically in the right place, I'm going to carefully brush the decal with my paper towel here to smooth out any little pockets that might have developed, so I get a nice smooth finish. And in doing so, And probably, I'm going to bump it a little bit, undoubtedly, and the end point is not going to be quite where I wanted it to. But that looks pretty good. Just be careful when you... So these don't stick, right? They're not stickers. There's some adhesive in them to keep them on the backing, but it's not like it's gluing itself to the tube right now. So these are definitely things that could be bumped and readjusted like while I'm putting the next one on. So I do want to be careful about that. So I'm going to try to attach the next one here. I'm going to put it just right up against the launch lug here as well. And again, same basic technique. I'm going to hold it down with my thumb and then start spinning it. I'm going to do my best not to get anywhere near the other decal because I'm happy with where it is right now, and I really do not want it to be adjusted. Now that's nowhere near where it ought to be. So I'm going to carefully just kind of adjust it to get them pieces to meet up here, but I'm probably going to have to adjust the thing as a whole because it's not perfectly in the right place. All right, that looks pretty good. Again, once you get it basically where you want, then it's time to use a piece of tissue paper or paper towel like so, and just smooth the decal out. I have a little bubble that I'm kind of pushing along here, and they didn't quite line up again, so I'm just going to adjust it ever so slightly with my finger to, oops, yeah, I adjusted it a little bit too hard there. Adjust it to get it where I want it to be. And I can see that it's, if you get this lying flat, it's not going to be deformed at all. So I don't quite have it in a perfect loop because I can see the deformation. But overall, I'd say that looks pretty good. I can tell there's a little bit of inconsistency. There's also some inconsistency in my paint job, but I'm not super concerned about that. All right, decals are attached. There are only 3 of them. If you're doing a more sophisticated kit, you might have dozens of them, and that takes time. This water, I got it nice and piping hot before I started the video, but it's quite cool now. You want it to be warm at least when you're applying them. So I would have to go get some more water at this point anyway. But this is now, ooh, it's dusty. Let's brush that off. This is now essentially built. The only thing that's worth discussing at this point is how to take care of the cluster. Now, so this takes 3 motors to launch. Putting them in obviously is no different, but getting them to launch simultaneously, have all of them light, is a bit of a feat. So here is a box of Estes motors. I don't have any mini ones on me right now, so they're essentially going to fit together like this. And the trick of it is that you need to wire them using your igniters so that you get a bit of a circuit, essentially. Now, you can go out and buy a piece of hardware called a clip whip, which is it's like an alligator clip that hooks up to your launch system and then just branches off into however many segments you need. So that's always an option. You can buy a clip whip that has 3, that goes from 1 out to 3, and that should probably do the trick. The alternative, and what I do personally, is my Estes launch system is the Pro Series 2 launcher, and it actually has kind of like a built-in clip whip. So it has 4 alligator clip connectors instead of just 2. So it can handle 2 motors simultaneously. But we need 3. So how do you do that? Well, essentially what you need to do is you need to take the igniter and you need to braid it to, well, at least 2 of them, braid them together. And I will show you how to do that momentarily. All right, so here are a pair of igniters. They're still from the factory, they're still taped together. So take them apart. They would go into the motor like so. And what you end up doing, you fold them down, usually. But in this case, the goal is to have them so that they come together like this. And then you're just going to kind of twist two of the leads together. So I'm going to take it out at this point. So you'd end up twisting together these two leads and these two leads, so that uh, one of your leads from your launcher, from your launch system, will go and it will run through one and then back out the other. The third one, if I'm using the Pro Series launcher, just I hook up to the third one and the second set of clips anyway, and it is perfectly fine. If you are using the more like stock Estes one that has just two alligator clips, this is a more serious problem. It is possible, although rather difficult, to braid three of them together, so that you only end up having to clip the two leads that you have onto two different places. But I mean, that's hard. You'd have to kind of braid it like this, and you can't braid it in a triangle. That's really not an option, because what would you clip the third side to? You're really best getting a clip in order to do this if you don't have a Pro Series launcher or another good option like that. Do not try to use more than one launcher to launch this. That is just not a good plan. The other thing too is that some time ago, Estes igniters were dipped in pyrogenic material, and they were really, really reliable because the end tip burst into flame and the flames lit the motor. At some point, the federal government, kind of got wise to what they were doing, and it's not, from what I was told by people at Estes, it's not 100% legal to be mailing things with pyrogen tips on them through the mail. So Estes ended up reimagining what this goop on the end of the wires are. Now, you could just have special metal at the end that gets hot when you run current through it. I mean, that's basically how it works. And then there's just a glue holding them together. There was a time when the Estes igniters, that's basically what it was. And they were far less useful because you had to get them to a specific temperature in order for the motor to catch, instead of having the spark that the pyrogen was adding. There are ways around this, and Estes has released a new kind of igniter that's supposed to be more reliable. I can't really attest to that, but we'll see. What I've done is I've tried to save all my old style igniters, the ones that are like 10 years old at this point, because they had the more reliable tip on them. But the main thing that you need to do, aside from making sure that your igniters, everything is perfect when you put them in, is to make sure whatever ignition system you have will put out enough voltage. If you are trying to launch 3 motors off of the generic launcher that came with like a starter set that you bought, it's probably not going to work, because there's not enough voltage to light all of them reliably if you're trying to do 3 at the same time. The Pro Series launch system that I have, I like, because you can run it off of either a bunch of C batteries, which is okay. I mean, it's a total of, it takes 6 of them, so that would be 9 volts. But you can also run it off of a lithium polymer rechargeable battery, which has a voltage of 11.1. The higher the voltage, the better you get. And probably the best option would be to do what big clubs do, and that is use a car battery, which is significantly higher voltage. Regardless, this actual launching procedure is not particularly easy, and this is why this is a more advanced build. But regardless, hopefully you had fun at least building it, and if you need assistance in launching it, well, there are plenty of videos you could be finding out on the internet in order to do that, or take some of the advice that I just provided you. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you in our next build.